So I just finished watching the I Survived, I Guess Dating Goodbye documentary, Joshua Harris. Um, and I have a shit ton of thoughts. I actually have watched it twice now, and whew, the second time I watched it and I made notes all through it, and I kind of looked up who he was interviewing when he was interviewing the people who like authored books and stuff, and I have a lot of thoughts, and so I'm probably going to make a more detailed video with all of those notes at another time, soon, hopefully. But I felt like I wanted to go ahead and get some of it out there, even though this video is going to be like shitty quality and stuff. I'm sitting here on my couch with my dogs. Anyway, basically, I think the first couple of things that I wanted to say was that when I've kind of been out of like evangelical, especially Christian culture for a while. I attend an Episcopal church, but I've been out of sort of this like very rigid, all religious, everything revolves around God type culture for quite some time. And so I don't know why. Well, I guess the main thing I would say is if you're going into this expecting, like, definitely don't expect any sort of like revolutionary change on his part. There is still a strict adherence, and it kind of comes up all through it, especially with people he interviews and stuff. There's definitely a strict adherence still to the purity culture and all of that sort of thing. It gets messy. So there was a lot of things that were in there that to me almost felt like I was, like almost kind of made me angry. And like there was definitely some homophobic undertones to some things. And there was definitely, like I said, still just a lot of adherence to a lot of stuff that comes from purity culture. And, but when I take a step back, I'm kind of like, what did I expect? What did I really think was going to, he's still a Christian and he still adheres to that belief system. And so like to really truly engage with it, I kind of feel like I had to set aside my sort of like expectation and wish that some of that would be removed. The other main thought that I wanted to say was the title, I Survived, I Kissed Dating Goodbye. A lot of this started from people tweeting and from people saying things about how like purity culture had harmed them and how this book specifically had been used against them because it was kind of this really big book within the culture. And it gets into it a little bit in the documentary, but it's really like, there was kind of this, and I don't want to get too distracted from what I'm trying to say, but there was this whole like True Love Waits movement, and then this, which started in like kind of like the early 90s, and this book was published in 1997, and it kind of took that whole purity culture, and you're supposed to say no, and you're not supposed to have sex, and all this kind of stuff, and it kind of took it to a new level. Like, you don't have sex by not dating. And what ended up happening, of course, is there's so many people, purity culture in general, but there's just so many people who like that specific model of courtship and of you like just like you can't even really have relationships and friendships with the opposite sex without worrying about like, oh my God, we're gonna like, like accidentally have sex if we have too close of a relationship. And you can't talk to some, like you can't go out with somebody unless anyway, there's so much there. So it sort of all started with these people being like, this was really harmful, and other people bringing up this conversation, and other people saying this book that you wrote was harmful and damaging and hurtful and used against us, and like, we're 10, 20, we get 20 years really past that, and it's kind of like how many ways we are all still hurting from this particular brand of theology and how it was expressed. And what bothers me is I feel like the title sort of came from that. The title sort of came from, oh, I'm going to go listen to all of these stories of these people who were hurt by my book. And he also, obviously is, oh, going to talk to people who were helped by his book and all this kind of stuff. But the title really felt like it came more from people who had survived. I use that term a little bit. For a lot of people, obviously, there's not going to be this direct sort of threat that you've survived, but there was a lot of damage and a lot of trauma, and there probably were a lot of people, depending on circumstances, whether LGBT issues were involved, or whether rape was involved, or whether even maybe more middle of the spectrum type issues were involved, where maybe it did bring people to this point of it's sort of being survival, because you get to this point where it really makes you feel so worthless and like you're trapped and just like depression and suicide and all of these sorts of things. And I feel like Joshua Harris, this documentary, don't be mistaken, this documentary is about him, and it's about his journey going back and wrestling with the book, which is fine, but it really made the title feel sort of strange, because it becomes sort of clear, and like through little things that are said throughout the documentary and at different points, that this documentary is about him surviving his own book and the aftermath and all that came with it. And that really rubbed me the wrong way, because that, to me, I really do think a lot of this is him rebranding. There's more history to this too, and I'll get into this a little bit too. He doesn't ever mention the church that he was pastor of by name in the documentary, and part of me feels like that is somewhat intentional. He was directly related to a church and to an organization of churches that they actually had legal cases brought against them for covering up sexual abuse. And the cases were ultimately dismissed because the statute of limitations had passed. It gets a little dicey as far as like how he may have been involved and how much he may have known or not known. I don't know what he's claimed or what he hasn't claimed, but it was shortly after that he stepped down and then went to graduate school, where he is now in Canada. So I feel like that obviously the documentary isn't about that, but I feel like that is such a significant part of the story, and such a significant part of he's trying to recreate himself within a system where his livelihood has been being a pastor, and his livelihood has been by books he's written and pastoring and all this sort of stuff, and all of that sort of fell apart, and he stepped down and is going to and I think that is admirable, and I think that is good, but I also feel like he says in the documentary, all of this needs to be as public as the book that I wrote. And it's like, maybe it doesn't. He really acts like he's taking responsibility for like opening up this conversation and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, dude, we've been having this conversation without you for many years now. You just happened to join in, which is frustrating. And so, again, going back to the title and what I was trying to say initially anyway, the documentary is about how he survived I Kissed Amy Goodbye. And it's just like, there comes a point where what I don't think he's putting into the perspective, or enough perspective, I think there's a lot that he says that is good. I think there's a lot that he says that it's kind of like, oh, you're starting to get it. You're starting to get it. You are starting to get it. But I get a little bit frustrated because I feel like he stops short, and I feel like he doesn't understand that his position of having benefited off of this financially, of not having suffered from it at all in the same ways that other people have. He married a year after the book was published, continued to write and publish books around this subject, all that sort of thing. I feel like a lot of this is ignoring how much weight that holds, and that it is different for people who are on the other side of it, and that power differential. Like I don't want to have to explain this, but there is a power differential there when people have been the victim of something versus someone who, I don't think this happened in a bubble. I don't think Joshua Harris is 100% to blame. I think, in a way, because of his background, I think he is a little bit of product of his own environment. But I think the difference is now he is in a position where if he is truly realizing the damage and the hurt and how negative all of this has been, because of his position of power and because of his position as being an author and because of his position as having authority in this movement and authority in a church, he has a greater responsibility than other people do to own up and do something different. And it's hard because it's like, I feel like he thinks he's trying to do that, and I do see a lot of ways that he is doing that and trying to do that. But it's just, he still tries to wrap it up in this neat little package, especially at the end. There's this, here, I wrote it down verbatim while I was listening to it the second time, where he says, like, it's this feast at the end, and he talks about, there's this whole, like, hinting throughout of, oh, he's haunted, and by, like, feeling like this, you know, what damage he may have done with this book or whatnot. And it says, no ghosts, no lingering regrets, only a community of fully alive, fully human, fully redeemed men and women who are loved and healed and who find their purity alone in Jesus. That's the only exact wording of the quote that I got, but some more of the gist of it was, not just if you're the person who has been broken by what other people have done or broken by what you have done in, you know, to yourself, but also if you're the person who, you know, he is, that has these ghosts and these regrets and these things that he's done to other people. And it's like, oh man, I get within the theology that that's like true, but there's this big part of me that just wants to be like, just shut up. Shut up and truly let the other people speak and be heard. Sit down, shut up. This is not about you surviving the hurt and the damage that you've caused to other people. This is not about you surviving I Kiss Dating Goodbye. And I think that fundamentally is what bothers me about, beyond, like, again, like, he still very much reinforces purity culture within the documentary. Beyond that, because I do understand that that's still sort of within, you know, kind of what did I expect, really. But beyond that, the main thing that bothers me is basically the title and the focus, is that it really feels like it co-opts the people who were truly victimized and truly hurt by this into his own thing, where he's saying, I survived I Kiss Dating Goodbye. And that just makes me want to be like, nope, you still don't get it. Sit down, shut up, keep listening. You're getting there. You're trying, but you're still trying to wrap it up in this neat little package with a cute little bow that now just says, I don't have all the answers. Yay me, I'm so fantastic. And that's all I have to say for now.